My name is Joe Peroni, and this is the Rise Above Project. And today, my premise is that most people are progressives or liberals, yet they just don't know it. Now, why did I want to do this show today? I was inspired because this week, Zoran Mamdani, he won the New York City Democratic mayoral primary, which was amazing. So who did he beat? He beat Andrew Cuomo. Now, Andrew Cuomo, well, first of all, Cuomo lost by 7 points, which is a lot. So he got destroyed. But when we look at the Cuomo name, his father was the governor of New York from 1983 to 1994. So you're looking at 11 years. Now, one of the things that I talk about a lot as a liberal is that we want to believe that America is a meritocracy, but you could find many, many ways that it's actually not. A lot of it is as if you're born into money and you are given the good things in life, where somebody else has to fight for it all the time. And with Andrew Cuomo, I'm not saying he's a terrible person. I mean, he is a Democrat, although he's not the kind of Democrat that I prefer. But we're looking at a guy here where is it complete meritocracy when you have the Cuomo name and your father is already paving the way for you. So Andrew Cuomo now is about, 68 years old. How did he get into the position that he got in? Obviously, it was from his father. And there's a lot of negatives with Andrew Cuomo. He is one of those corporatists, or yes, he's kind of liberal, but he's also very tied into rich corporate people and Wall Street, which puts him right on the line with a lot of Republicans. So why am I talking about this? It's because, again, I think most people, if you ask them, most people on the street, if you give them an actual question about different things, whether it's the economy or social situations, they do lean liberal, but they are being brainwashed by media all the time. Let's take a look at this, because when Zoran Mamdani won this week, I thought it was amazing. The establishment media, and I mean on both sides, we're talking conservative and liberal. So we have on MSNBC, which is obviously on the liberal side, they are bad-mouthing Mamdani 24 hours a day, 7 days a week that I've seen so far, just like they are on Fox News. It's just that they're hitting him in different ways. Now, I'm no conservative, but let's look at the way that they're going after Zoran. The first thing they do is say, oh, he's Indian, he's a Muslim, he's 33 years old, and he's a proud democratic socialist. So they go after all of that, right? So they go, oh, he has socialist policies. Well, we can do this at another date here, but the United States is filled with democratic socialism, and every time we move in that direction, the United States gets better. We can look at European countries, we can look at Scandinavian countries of how they do with democratic socialism. And they're much happier, better countries than the United States is in many ways. The other thing that they go after is that he's only 33 years old and he doesn't have a lot of experience. But you could also say, too, he doesn't have the experience of an Andrew Cuomo, who has sexually abused like 13 different women and then went after at least 4 of those women in retribution for them to come because they came after him. So he doesn't have the experience yet to have done that, and then still think it's okay to run for public office. And he's still going to run for public office again, even after he got beat, because he's going to run as an independent. So he just doesn't seem to understand that when you're doing, supposedly as a liberal, you're doing pro-women policies. One of those policies might be is that you don't abuse women along the way. So I don't... As far as I'm concerned, he's pretty close to a Republican. The other thing is that they haven't, or Mamdani hasn't had the time yet to be as corrupt as people like Andrew Cuomo are, or Eric Adams, who also is up on federal charges, who is also going to be running for mayor. So the age and experience thing, I don't think it matters all that much. What matters is what he's saying and what he wants to do. It's been interesting because Fox News has been advised not to do an itemized list of what Mamdani wants to do. Because even Fox viewers who are basically cultists and they just kind of go along with everything that's on Fox News and they have no critical thinking, they like what he has to say. And they're making him more popular by listing the things that he wants to do. But Fox News in all its glory, they go after him because he's a Muslim. And I hate to say it, but one of my friends did this week. He posted this thing on Facebook about, and he wasn't the only one, a lot of people did this. They post this thing about 9/11, how a Muslim hit the towers and destroyed the Twin Towers, blah, blah, blah. And now they're equating that from, 24 years ago to now, to where there's a Muslim who is going to be running for mayor in New York City. What's the connotation there? That in the United States, you're not allowed to be Muslim? I don't think these people understand what being an American is. Because if you're a real American, I think you would understand that you could be Mormon, Catholic, Protestant, Muslim, Jewish, whatever, Lutheran, you could be anything you want. And you can be a United States citizen. So where is it now that people are okay with being so openly prejudiced? And we see this on Fox News. It's incredible. It's because people don't fight back hard enough. So the establishment, again, trying to push out Mamdani here because he's not just a Democrat. He is a very liberal Democrat, and as he would say, a socialist. Now, on the liberal side or Democrat side, they have this idea that you should be moderate because you're scared of these conservative Republicans. You're like, well, I don't want to be too liberal, so I want to be a little bit conservative. So if you can't beat them, just join them type of thing. And that comes across as very inauthentic. Like, how does this really work, though? Because Hillary was moderate, and she lost. So that's number one. Then we have Kamala Harris, who is very liberal, but when she ran her campaign, when she had the ability, or at least a few months, to be able to tell people who she really was, she didn't do it to the best of her ability of what she did. Because she believes in universal health care. But did she say that during her campaign? No, because that's too liberal. But as I'll tell you, most people do believe in that, though. What other mistake did she make? She palled around with Liz Cheney, a Republican. So she's trying to get or siphon off some of the votes from Republicans. Nobody's going to do that just because she's hanging out with Liz Cheney. That's not going to happen. Who else did she hang out with? She hung out with Mark Cuban. Now, I like Shark Tank as much as the next person, probably more. I like Mark Cuban. He's liberal and he's also a billionaire. Okay. But it gives the wrong message when you're palling around with Mark Cuban, because as a real liberal, you need to separate yourself from that billionaire class. Unless, of course, they're going to talk to the poor and middle class who really need it, and you're going to move your policies towards them. So before the show gets too long, because I've got a lot of things to say here, what's the actual lesson? The lesson is that moderation is for losers. Being in the middle of the road gets you hit head on from both directions, so it's not worth it. Number two, a real liberal or a real Democrat needs to distance themselves from Wall Street and big business. Number three, they need a laser-like progressive message that goes directly to the average person. All right. Why? Because of my premise. Because the average person is liberal, but they don't know it. They agree with the policies, but they don't like lukewarm politicians who don't fight for them. And this is why you get a lot of ignorant people who vote for Trump thinking that he's talking to them when all he cares about is the oligarchs and billionaire class. So right now, you probably don't believe me. We're 10 minutes into this already. So if you're watching this and you just want to prove something to a friend, have them fast forward the first 10 minutes if you like. Now, I'm going to prove this to you. And there's no way that you could say anything different. You can disagree, but the facts are the facts. So let's start off with the economy. Again, my premise, most people are liberal. 82% of Americans think wealthy people have too much power and influence in Washington. 69% think large businesses have too much power and influence in Washington. 59% and 72% of likely voters think Wall Street has too much power in Washington. 78% of likely voters support stronger rules and enforcement on the financial industry. 65% of Americans think our economic system unfairly favors powerful interests. 59% of Americans and 43% of Republicans think corporations make too much profit. Okay, so obviously these numbers are way higher than 50%, and all of these things are what true liberals believe in. Now, Republicans will hide this from you because they are looking out for the best interest of Wall Street and big business. So all of these things go to the fact that anywhere from 59% all the way up to 82% in these criterias, that people are leaning towards that, the liberal or progressive point of view. Let me continue. Let's talk about inequality. Here's something that's really interesting because that's a major part of the Democratic Party, or you can say liberal or progressive, whichever you prefer. 82% of Americans think economic inequality is a very big problem in the United States. Interestingly, 69% of Republicans also share that view. Well, that means 69% of Republicans share the liberal view. So what are they watching? Why are they so ignorant? And why are they afraid to jump away from their identity and understand that the liberal way is the way to go? 66% of Americans think money and wealth should be distributed more evenly. Yes, absolutely. Definitely what a Democrat would say. 72% of Americans say it's extremely or very important to reduce poverty. Okay, interesting. Like it's 72, it should be 100, right? So that other percentage is very conservative Republicans. But again, 72%. 59% of registered voters favor raising the maximum amount that low-wage workers can make and still be eligible for the Earned Income Tax Credit. All right, so we're looking for government help for workers that don't make a lot of money. 59% of registered voters feel this way, including 51% of Republicans. So again, why are we running Democrats who are trying to sit in the middle and be lukewarm? Own this. Say what you want to do. Don't care about these big companies and even MSNBC. The people who own these things are millionaires and billionaires. So of course, they're not going to push towards liberal policies. They talk a liberal game sometime on MSNBC and sometimes CNN, but they don't really want to push that hard. Obviously, they talk bad about AOC. And by the way, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, she is the most popular Democrat. But you're not going to hear that on the news. Actually, she's the most popular of the ones that is actually in politics. The two most popular are Barack Obama and Michelle Obama, but they're not in politics right now. Let's continue. Let's talk about money in politics, something that Republicans are very good at. I mean, we just saw Trump win an election. He's got the richest guy on the face of the planet buying everything and buying votes. Do we care about that? Liberals, did we talk about that enough? No, but this is what people think. 96% of Americans, including 96% of Republicans, believe money in politics is to blame for the dysfunction in the U.S. political system. Interesting. So even if Republicans believe that, how ignorant are they? that they don't understand that it's most of the time the Republicans doing this, and they have more money than the Democrats do, and they're the ones causing this. Unless, of course, there's something that they want to be passed, and they don't care that they're buying elections. 84% of Americans, including 80% of Republicans, believe money has too much influence in politics. 78% of Americans say we need sweeping new laws to reduce the influence of money in politics. 73% of registered voters have an unfavorable opinion of the Supreme Court. Okay, so that's an interesting one, because the Supreme Court, again, is been stacked as conservative, and yet they get very low ratings when you ask the average American what we think of the Supreme Court. So if you're a liberal, why don't you fight? That's a good question. Let's talk about taxes. 80% of Americans think some corporations don't pay their fair share of taxes. Yes, that's what every liberal Democrat would say. 78% think that some wealthy people don't pay their fair share of taxes. Absolutely. 76% believe the wealthiest Americans should pay higher taxes. Here you go. If 76% of people believe this, then why did Republicans vote for a president who wants to give tax breaks to the rich? And how is he going to pay for that? By gutting Medicaid. Now, depending on where you are in this country, it's somewhere between 25 to 40% of Americans rely on Medicaid. Now, if you're a child, there's a lot of children that get resources through Medicaid. I can go on with that forever, but the point is, if anywhere between 25 to 40% of Americans rely on Medicaid, then why are Republicans voting to give tax breaks to the rich? And they're doing it by robbing poor people. %60 of registered voters believe corporations pay too little in taxes. Goes back to my last point. 87% of Americans say it's critical to preserve Social Security, even if it means increasing Social Security taxes. And there you go. Republicans are now trying to pass a bill that they're trying to get rid of Social Security. Okay, well, I thought most people want to preserve Social Security. There's a gap here. And you could only use one word, right? It's just people's ignorance. Like, they'll watch something on TV, they'll see a politician that has a lot of bluster and yells, screams, and they think, wow, that guy's fighting for me. And he's not. 67% of Americans support lifting the cap to require higher income workers to pay Social Security taxes on all of their wages. Of course. But yet we have Republicans that are trying to get rid of Social Security. Let's talk about the minimum wage. 18 minutes into the show. Let me try to do this as quick as I can. There's a lot. Again, I'm doing all this to prove beyond the shadow of a doubt that most people are liberal. Minimum wage. 66% of Americans favor raising the federal minimum wage. Boom. Okay. 59% favor raising the federal minimum wage. Okay, so then why are Republicans continue to fight against this? And why do people continue to vote Republican? Because you're voting for your money to go down, right? You're voting so you don't get a raise. 48% support raising the national minimum wage to $15 an hour. Now, if you watch Fox News, that's all they do is say that it's the worst thing ever. $15 is way too much. If we go back to Zoran Mamdani, I forget in the amount of time he wants to do it, but he wants the minimum wage in New York City to be $30 an hour, which makes sense if you know how expensive New York City is. 63% of registered voters think the minimum wage should be adjusted each year by the rate of inflation. Of course, because the minimum wage has not gone up with inflation since 1973. So doesn't that make sense? I want to know the other 40% that don't think it should go up. Crazy. Workers' rights. 61% of Americans, including 42% of Republicans, approve of labor unions. Again, some of these unions did not support Democrats this time. They supported the Republicans who want unions to be crushed and to be destroyed and to be eliminated. So why you would vote for that, I mean, if you're a cockroach and you're voting for Raid, I don't understand it, but that's what a lot of Republicans do. Here's a great one. 74% of registered voters, including 71% of Republicans, support requiring employers to offer paid parental and medical leave. This is considered to be extremely progressive, extremely liberal, where you would see it in Scandinavian countries. But if you ask people on the street if this sounds like a good idea, they'll say yes. But if you look at the politicians that are supposed to be representing us, they don't move towards doing that. And Republicans will act like you're going to destroy the whole country if you decide to help people. "78% of likely voters favor establishing a national fund that offers all workers 12 weeks of paid family and medical leave." Again, we're talking about democratic, and let me say the word, say it loud and proud, democratic socialism. Yes. 78% of people agree with that. Let's talk about health care real quick. 60% of Americans believe it is the federal government's responsibility to make sure all Americans have health care coverage. 60%. That means Republicans feel that way too. And yes, that's democratic socialism again. 60% of registered voters favor expanding Medicare to provide health insurance to every American. Yes, democratic socialism again, and Republicans actually are for that. 58% of the public favors replacing Obamacare with a federally funded health care program providing insurance for all Americans. Okay, now we're back to Kamala Harris, and why did you not talk about universal health care? Right? You were afraid, so you tried to inch over, you tried to cozy up to some conservatives thinking that you were going to siphon off those votes, but that's never going to happen and never did happen. 64% of registered voters favor their state accepting the Obamacare plan for expanding Medicaid in their state. Now you have Republican governors that stop this. So when are we ever going to get to the point that we realize that Republicans are pulling the wool over their own constituents' eyes to the point where most Republicans vote against their best interests, and they're happy to do it? Let's continue. Let me see how quick I can get through this for you, just in case some of you get bored with facts. So here's education. 63% of registered voters favor making 4-year public colleges and universities tuition free. There we go. Again, democratic socialism. Now, of course, you're going to get some Republicans on the other side saying you can't do that. Well, number one, you can do that. They'll always say, well, how do you pay for this? But here's the thing. When you give millionaires and billionaires tax breaks, nobody says, how do you pay for that? And the answer is that you screw people over on their welfare and Medicaid and Medicare and everything else. And the SNAP program. So you're the opposite of Robin Hood. You steal from the poor to give to the rich. That's how you do it. And people don't want to answer that question. 59% of Americans favor free early childhood education. Well, that's interesting because they already cut that program, right? Thank you, Republicans, again, because nothing says that you like meritocracy and competition when you want poor people from poor areas not to be able to have those kids go to school, right? Because they have Head Start programs, but you don't want that because your rich son or your rich daughter that's going to inherit the money from you is also going to inherit all the good things that you can give them now that other people can't afford. And then you're going to say how much better your kids are and how much smarter they are and everything else when, you know, they're hitting a home run, but yet they were born on third base. And then you want to talk about meritocracy. Talk to somebody else. Let's talk about climate change and the environment. 76% of voters are very concerned or somewhat concerned about climate change. 68% of voters think it's possible to protect the environment and protect jobs. Very interesting because the Democrats actually did this. And Biden did it. And they're trying to reverse everything he did. So, and they actually went after AOC because she talks about this a lot. And Republicans are always saying how climate change doesn't exist and it's a hoax. So when we talk about green energy, yes, the world is moving towards green energy. Most people in the United States would say that green energy is a good thing, and you could not only preserve jobs, but you can increase the amount of jobs. But then when you go to the Republican side, they say it can't be done. Then when you go to the Democrat side, the ones who are moderate don't want to talk about it that much. So it's lukewarm, and nobody actually knows what a liberal or a Democrat is actually running for. 72% of voters think it's a bad idea to cut funding for scientific research. Well, guess what? Republicans or Donald Trump already has been cutting funding for scientific research for a lot of things, including cancer. Yeah, I want to know the person that says, you know what, we're spending too much money on cancer research. Who is that person? And why do we need to do that? And we're going to take that extra money and we're going to send it to who? A billionaire that's just going to put their money in another offshore account, probably? Ridiculous. 59% of voters say more needs to be done to address climate change. Yes, and that's what liberals say too. All right. Wow, there's a lot. Okay, gun safety. 84% of Americans support requiring background checks for all gun buyers. 72% of gun owners support requiring background checks for all gun owners. Interesting, right? So again, liberal Democrats are on the right side of history. 57% of Americans believe police officers generally treat black people and other minorities differently than they do white people. 60% of Americans believe the recent killings of black men by police are part of a broader pattern of how police treat black Americans. Okay, so most people agree with this. So again, liberals, Democrats, say it proud and loud. People agree with you. Just because you see the news and those millionaires and billionaires on the news don't necessarily want to talk about these things, but actually regular Americans do. Immigration. 68% of Americans, including 48% of Republicans, believe the country's openness to people from around the world is essential to who we are as a nation. Okay. There's been a lot of talk about immigration, so let me just leave you with that most people actually don't believe of what Trump's doing right now. We do believe in due process. We don't think that if you have brown skin, you need to be arrested and they have to try to throw you out of the country. You know, this doesn't make sense. I mean, we all agree that if there's a murderer, rapist, anything like this, they need to feel the full weight of the law. We all agree with that. But that's not what they're doing. They're not going after those criminals. They're going after people with jobs. And they're going after people with brown skin just because they're racist. Let's move this along. 58% of Americans believe that abortion should be legal in all or almost all cases. Okay, so we reverse Roe v. Wade. How and why? The Americans don't believe in that by percentage. 68% of Americans, including 54% of Republicans, support the requirement for private health insurance plans to cover the full cost of birth control. There you go. Even Republicans feel that, but they're trying to get rid of Planned Parenthood. So if you're going to talk about those talking points, I'm going to say you're identifying with an identity and you don't know the realities of life. Let's talk about same-sex marriage. 62% of Americans, including 70% of independents and 40% of Republicans, support same-sex marriage. 74% of millennials support same-sex marriage. Again, you're on the right side of history if you believe in same-sex marriages. But the 40% of Republicans, that's less than 50% believe in same-sex marriages. Okay, and you talk about small government, but you want government big enough to what? Get in a woman's uterus and also get in people's bedrooms. I don't understand it. So let me end it there because I didn't want this to be 30 minutes long, but let me say it again, real quick. What needs to be done is to deliver the message straight and true right between the eyeballs of every human being in the United States. Speak it loud and proud, be progressive and be liberal. And don't feel bad about it because what you're hearing on the news is not real. When you ask people what they really think, most people are good, decent, caring people that do care about their parents, they care about their spouses, they care about their kids, and they do want America to be more fair and be better. They don't want millionaires to have all the money. They don't think billionaires should pay less in taxes. And they don't want people to be poor and to be homeless and walking the streets. They want people to be fed. Most people are good people. They just need to hear the message from a person who cares, not from a person who's sitting in the middle, who looks like they're just trying to get a job and they were born into money and it doesn't really matter if they get the job or not. So let's take a look at the people, or people such as AOC, who was a waitress, by the way. My mother was a waitress. And take a look at somebody like Zoran Mamdani and look at their ideas, and do they sound good to you? And if you care so much about, oh my God, how are you going to pay for it? Ask yourself how you're going to pay for millionaires and billionaires to get paid more money. And why should they get more money if they're a billionaire? Does it really matter to them? And the answer is, we pay these millionaires and billionaires by taking the services from everyday people and the marginalized people. Does that sound like a decent thing for anybody to do? No, it doesn't. My name is Joe Peroni. This is the Rise Above Project. Please subscribe and tell a friend. Thank you.